Hello, beautiful souls. Thank you so much for clicking on this video. My name is Carolyn, and this channel is all about true crime, mystery, and anything abnormal. I highly recommend subscribing because this channel is definitely a vibe. So let's get right into today's story. I'm sure you've all heard words like gaslighting, grooming, conditioning, devaluation, but in today's story, we're going to see what the real life consequences are when someone does these actions. They won't just be words anymore. They'll come to life in today's story, which is about the Sarah Lawrence College sex cult. Picking a college can be difficult, especially if you don't know exactly what you want to do or exactly what direction you want to go in. So when a bunch of young students got accepted to Sarah Lawrence College, they were extremely excited. Sarah Lawrence is well known for inspiring arts and creativity, and it's really known as a college where people have a lot of freedom of expression and just a lot of amazing creative people to be surrounded by. The campus was like something out of a dream, with rolling hills, lots of beautiful areas for students to sit in under trees and study and hang out and have a lot of fun. Their unofficial motto is, "We're different and so are you." Talia Ray was a troubled young girl, not unlike a lot of other young people her age. Yet her story had a unique twist. It was her father, Lawrence Ray, who stood by her in situations that a lot of parents wouldn't have. In Talia's eye, her father was absolutely amazing and a truth teller, which will definitely later come into question. Just so there's no confusion, the school is called Sarah Lawrence and the father's name is Lawrence Ray, but he goes by Larry. He goes by a lot of different names, but throughout this video, I'm going to be referring to him as Larry. Larry's life had a lot of ups and downs. He hailed from the Bay Bridge neighborhood in Brooklyn, New York. Larry had worked on Wall Street in the 1980s. He had also been a consultant of sorts. His business dealings get a little bit complicated. Larry's different business dealings were sketchy a lot of the time. One thing that he was involved with was the nightlife in New Jersey. He owned two nightclubs, Club Malibu and the other one called JJ Rockers. Okay, rockers with the knockers, but no, they were just normal clubs. It was in these lively environments that he began to develop some pretty close friendships and allegiance to certain politicians. And he had connections on both sides of the Hudson River. He had connections in New Jersey. He also had connections in New York. Larry had jobs working in many different fields. At one point, he worked in insurance. At one point, he worked in construction. In one point, he worked in gambling. And he definitely had ties to the mafia. But Larry decided he had bigger dreams. He wanted to join the U.S. Air Force. He got accepted and he lasted a whole 19 days before being dishonorably discharged. He would later and throughout a lot of his life claim that he secretly worked for the CIA. And let's be honest, if you can own, and I'm not in a way trying to say being part of the U.S. Air Force is something easy to achieve, but if you only make it 19 days and then you're dishonorably discharged, I'm guessing you're not the person that they're really looking for to work for the CIA, but that's just my opinion. But if there was one thing that Larry was good at, it was good at making connections. Among the connections that Larry made, one stood out, and this was a connection to Bernard Carrick. It was a very close friendship. The two of them used to work out together a lot. They loved riding motorcycles together. They seemed to have a really good friendship. Fast forward to 1998, where things started to get shaken up. Bernard Carrick had moved up consistently in his career, and he was now the commissioner for the New York Department of Corrections. Larry was Bernard's best man at his wedding in November of that year. The bond between the two men ran deep. Larry and his partner at Club Malibu decided to help fund Bernard's wedding. The following year in 1999, Larry set up an introduction between Leonard and Frank DiMameso. Am I pronouncing that correctly? Not really sure. Frank was a key player in the Interstate Industrial Corporation, where Larry was working as a security consultant. Frank wasn't just there as a connection, he was there to hand out jobs. He hooked up Leonard's brother with a really good job. He also did renovations to Leonard's Bronx apartment, and he spent $165,000. Now here's the twist. All of the renovations were way beyond the legal lines. The scandal became such a big deal that Frank actually dropped out of the nomination of Secretary of Homeland Security in 2004. Larry, to keep himself out of trouble, kind of went to the cops and said, I might be able to provide some information to you about Frank and Bernard. Now, was Larry doing this because he wanted to fight for justice and get criminals caught? No. The real reason that Larry was offering to help the FBI was that he was working as a kind of, I guess you could consider it a consultant to the mafia. Basically, he was learning everything that he could through connections with the FBI to report back to the mafia. So, yeah, Larry, a lot. He's a lot. In the same year, Larry's wife, Teresa, decided that she was done with their marriage and she wanted a divorce, and she filed for it. One of the main reasons she wanted a divorce from Larry is because he was extremely abusive. At one point, she had called the police in fear for her life that this might be the time where Larry goes so far that she would not survive. When the police showed up, their daughter, Talia, sided with her father and basically said that the mother was the aggressor and Larry was basically just trying to defend himself. Now, the thing about Talia is that she grew up with Larry. Larry is a master manipulator and extremely, extremely good at grooming and manipulating people. So Talia had been being groomed and manipulated by her father since birth. So it wasn't that shocking that in this situation, as she would in all situations, she was on her father's side. And she was willing to lie to protect him. Larry ended up lying to police, saying that Teresa was abusive to Talia and her younger sister. As far as we know, these claims are not true, But what it did do is it got Larry full custody, which is what he wanted. He now had custody of 14-year-old Talia and 4-year-old Ava. Larry didn't just want full custody. He wanted to create complete isolation between his daughters and their mother. Now, in a situation, if a child is being abused, that may be a very smart decision to protect the child. However, in this case, everything was a figment of Larry's imagination. Teresa was a loving mother who loved her daughters and was never abusive to them in any way. So he's achieved the goal of full custody. He now needs to set up the situation so that Teresa doesn't even have the right to visitation to her own daughters. The police department started getting anonymous complaints against Teresa, Teresa's father, I believe Teresa's sister. There was just all of these complaints coming in saying that all of these people were hurting these two girls. I wonder if it was possibly Larry who was calling in, because none of it was ever proven that any of it was true. Larry started writing a blog in which he would go into a lot of details of the mistreatment that the girls were going through. He even wrote some blogs and he would write them, but then he would claim they were written by Talia. So it would be a post written. He wrote it, but then he would sign it Talia. So it would, to anyone from the outside looking, look as though this 14-year-old girl is telling the story of what she has been through. But here's where things take a sharp turn. Police start digging in and investigating all of these claims. Police found zero evidence that any of the claims against Teresa or any of her family members were told. When the youngest Ava was being questioned by the police, she told them that the reason she said that her mother had hurt her was because her dad told her to say that. So obviously, if we don't already know, we know that there's a bad case of parental alienation going on with Larry. Because one thing you'll learn about Larry is if he doesn't have 100% control over someone or a situation, he doesn't want any part of it. New Jersey's Child Welfare Department brought in a forensic expert who specializes in parental alienation and did find, in fact, that both of the girls were being coached by their father, Larry, and the claims they were making were simply not true. After a bunch of years of basically the families playing tug of war over these two girls, Larry ended up in quite a bit of trouble. There was a scheduled visit where the girls were supposed to go to their aunt's house for Thanksgiving, which was Teresa's sister, and Larry refused to allow the girls to go. He was slapped with charges for not following the child custody agreement. He was also charged for jumping bail and being in contempt of court. So while Larry was sentenced to prison, his daughter Talia believed that her father was being framed, obviously because that is what her father had been telling her. So with her father in prison, she didn't have the option to live with him anymore. Her option was to live with her mother, but Talia decided to live in homeless shelters instead of living with her mother, which I think shows how brainwashed she already was at this point by Larry. But when Talia went to college, she felt right at home. She had an amazing group of friends that she loved having political and philosophical discussions with, and really just doing what you do in college, learning all this new information and deciding what that means in your life and hearing other people's opinions. And everything while Larry was in prison seemed to be going really, really well for Talia at school. They all hung out on the 3rd floor of the Hill house, and they decided that in their sophomore year, they were all going to room together in a dorm. Talia led the way, and she found a perfect apartment dorm for her and all of these roommates to all move into together. Each student would have their own bedroom, and they had a very large living room and kitchen to share. It was the perfect location. It was located right in the middle of campus, but they needed 8 people to get the dorm. So they got together Gabe, Max, Santos, Daniel, Isabella, Claudia, and finally rounding out the group was Juliana. During this time, Larry was in prison. He had admitted to the custody charges. He had been sentenced to 6 months in prison. So that's where Larry was while Talia was organizing all of her friends to get a dorm together so they could all live together and hopefully have a really amazing time. Who knew it would turn into an absolute disastrous horror show? But Larry, his 6 months in jail, he found hard because he missed his honey girl. Honey girl is what he referred to Talia as. It sounds really weird to me. Maybe because I know that how psychotic this man is. Maybe I'm over analyzing, thinking honey girl to your daughter in college. It seems a bit creepy. I mean, I also know how creepy this man gets, but you let me know if a father was referring, I guess it could have a totally innocent meaning. I don't believe it had an innocent meaning in this case, but possibly could have had an innocent meaning. Let me know what you think, because I found it really weird, but maybe I'm just overthinking it, or maybe I know too much about this man. So after Larry got out of prison, he visited the dorms and decided to stay on the couch, and everyone seemed okay with that. Because at the beginning, it was presented as he was going to come and stay on the couch for a little while because he had just gotten out of prison and he didn't have a place to go. And Larry made sure that all of the students were happy to have him there. He would treat them to expensive dinners, he would organize movie nights, and he was always there to give them advice. He was always there to talk to about anything that was troubling them. And that's where the problems really got out of hand. Right away, Larry jumped in to help Isabella, who was Talia's best friend who was going through a breakup. He was there to talk to her about what she was upset about. But then somehow Larry goes from sleeping on the couch to now his daughter Talia, him, and Isabella are all sharing a bedroom. What the fuck? Yeah. So that shit's real weird. The other students, they didn't look at it as that strange. They were also already being manipulated by Larry, so I'm pretty sure that would be why the majority of them were not concerned, at least a little bit, about a father-daughter and her best friend all sharing a bedroom. But he would always go out of his way to make these roommates feel special, feel seen, feel heard, like the typical cult leader bullshit that they do at the beginning, where they're grooming and gaslighting and love bombing these people so that he can then later control every single thing that they do. A lot of the students also thought that Talia, because her dad had been in prison, she really missed him. So a lot of them kind of used that as the reasoning as to why he would be continuing to live with a group of college students. There definitely were complaints to the college. The fact that this grown-ass man is living in a dorm on campus with a bunch of college students. The college's response, I find strange. They were saying, well, we can't deny a father access to his daughter's dorm room. Now, to me, if other people in that dorm are uncomfortable with him being there, I would think, hell yeah, of course you would stop him from being there. But I don't know, Sarah Lawrence College just decided that, yeah, we're cool with it. Do as you'd like, because we're good. So this is when the serious mind games began. Larry was taking over as the guardian of the entire dorm. Talia, his daughter, was dating a boy named Santos who also lived at the dorm. And Santos started getting close to Larry because that was his girlfriend's father. Claudia, who had a very strong desire to please people, she was actually getting her medical degree. So this was a very intelligent young woman. But she too fell under the trap of Larry. The unofficial kind of house rules were is if anybody was dealing with any issue about absolutely anything, they should talk to Larry. Larry is painted as this very intelligent, older, mature man who can help them through different traumas and difficulties in their life. And it's all bullshit. It's all bullshit. But the students slowly, more and more, are getting indoctrinated to this belief. Another student in the dorm, his name was Daniel. And Daniel really, they all suffered. They all suffered immensely. Daniel suffered a lot. Daniel was in college and he was questioning his sexuality. He was thinking, I might be gay, I might not, I'm not really sure. Maybe he was thinking of experimenting so he could figure out what it is that he preferred. And he decided, he was actually dating a girl named Raven at this time. And he decided that he wanted to break up with her because he was so strongly questioning his sexuality and starting to come to the realization that he was gay. And everyone, including his friend Santos, recommended talking to the unofficial messiah of the dorm, Larry. Finally, Daniel and Larry decided to meet up at a coffee shop so that they could talk in privacy without the other roommates around. And Daniel felt extremely comfortable talking to Larry about things that he had never spoken to anyone about. And this is something that is so prevalent with cult leaders, is they're very charming. They're very good at looking at a person and knowing their weaknesses. They're very good at manipulating those weaknesses. And they can make a person feel very, very special, heard, and seen in a way that they never have before. So this coffee that the two had ended up lasting for 6 hours. And Daniel left this coffee date that he had with Larry feeling really, really good and really feeling like he had got a lot off his chest. Little did he know that everything he disclosed would later be used by Larry to further manipulate and control Daniel. Larry decided to change Daniel's name to Danny. This would not be the only time he changes Daniel's name. But the reason it seems that from other cult leaders where they want you to separate from your identity. They don't want your personal identity to exist at all. So anything associated to that old identity, they want to shift and change and make that something that's very far away from who you are. And it's all different techniques that are used by cult leaders. And Larry was very good at knowing which manipulations worked best on which students. Larry told Daniel, or Danny, I guess now I'm going to call him Daniel. His name is Daniel. Larry told him that he was very good at finding the brokenness in people and for him to be able to transform it. And he basically tells Daniel, you have to live in this pain to break free from these things that are holding you back. Larry also said that his skill set had been breaking minds, creating loops it's impossible to get out of. So that doesn't sound good. I'm not sure how the students are interpreting that as a positive or something that could be helpful. I'm not clear. Larry said that that is what he had done when he worked for the CIA, which there's like literally zero chance that he ever worked for the CIA, but he really likes to say it. I think he thinks it gives him some kind of authority or makes him special, but dude, you lasted 19 days in the Marines and you got dishonorably discharged. 19 days? The CIA is not looking for you to join the ranks, trust me. And I just want to read you some of the wording, because I think a lot of times with cults, when we look from the outside, we're like, how could they fall for that? So I think a lot of times the wording that's used by cult leaders is very important. They know it's very important and they choose every word very, very carefully. So I just want to read some direct quotes of things Larry said to Daniel. He said, I also have the ability to unravel the knots people have made in themselves. I told you I was going to show you how it works so you could understand or even do it yourself. So Larry is now almost putting him in a position that he is the only person who can help these students. He is the only person who can understand the pain and everything they've gone through and any issues they're dealing with. Larry has now dominated in their mind. He is the answer to everything. When the school year was over for the summer, Larry had an apartment in New York City. His daughter, Talia, went to stay with him, Isabella, and they went to live there. Daniel also went and stayed there because he had nowhere else to go. And he would do these kind of big therapy sessions, I guess you would call it. Hell, it definitely was not therapy. I guess we call these brainwashing sessions. Anyways, during one of these deep sessions, Larry convinced all of the students who were present He convinces them Talia had all brought them together, which Talia had done. She had brought them all together to live in this dorm. But he said that Talia had brought all of these people together because they were so special and she knew that her father could help them. He told them that they had all been chosen because each and every one of them had been abused as a child. He also told them that all of them wanted to unalive themselves. The truth of the matter was, not all of these students had been abused, and not all of them wanted to take their lives. Over time, Larry was able to convince all of them that they had been severely abused as children. But not all the students felt that way. They definitely were going through some angst and some confusion, and they're in their sophomore year of college, and there's just a lot that they're learning about life and themselves. And this kind of confusion and being uncertain about certain things does not equate to wanting to take your life. But Larry was convincing them that because they had these doubts and these questions and this confusion, that's what it meant. And when Larry gave this explanation, all of the students said, well, it's Larry, so he must be right. The brainwashing was working almost better than Larry had even imagined. Larry started making all of their small decisions for them. He convinced them that he knew better and they should follow him. They should sleep when he told them to. The decisions they made of who they had in their life and who they spoke to in their family, whether or not they ate dinner, whether, any of these kinds of decisions. Larry got all of these students to the point where they would defer to Larry for everything. If Larry said you should do X, Y, or Z, that student knew I need to do X, Y, or Z. So once he had them letting him make smaller decisions in their lives, he then had the ability to start controlling the big decisions in their life. And this is when the real torture of these poor students began. Larry also started giving huge meanings behind really small incidents. So say, for example, one of the students was cleaning the frying pan, and they ended up, while they were cleaning, they scratched a scratch in the frying pan. Larry would then say that student, that whole reasoning behind scratching the frying pan was they were questioning his ultimate mission, which any logical person could separate the two and not figure out, no matter how many mental cartwheels you do, these two things, scratching a frying pan and being against Larry's major mission in life, have no connection in a logical person's mind. But Larry had convinced these students, I scratched the frying pan, that means I doubt Larry. So if I doubt Larry, I need to be more committed to Larry. The more committed I am to Larry, the more control he has. Sounds dramatic, but cults be cultin'. So because of these scratches on a frying pan, it was unquestionably determined that they were trying to sabotage Larry, and he held a meeting with all the students. Larry would scream, yell, belittle, just berate, anything he could to any student. In this situation with the frying pan, this is just one example. He did this about absolutely everything. I'm just using this one specific as an example. And this student who had scratched the frying pan at the end of this meeting was just in a ball of tears, feeling absolutely horrible about themselves, and that they were then convinced they were trying to sabotage Larry. Now, so far, Larry's not making any money. He wants to make money out of this. and he wants to keep them feeling trapped to him forever. So he starts coming up with these absolutely ridiculous situations where he would say that the students had damaged part of his apartment, the New York apartment that I think there was him and 5 students living in it. He would convince them that they had caused like $300,000 in damages. If they were not able to pay them back, Larry's solution was trafficking them. One of the girls was making thousands and thousands of dollars every day offering sex services, and all of that money went to Larry. Other students would get money from their families or parts of their student loans or part-time jobs that they have. And what Larry would do was they would give Larry his money, and Larry would put the money in a bank account with their name on it. So if I give money, he's putting my money in a bank account with the name Carolyn on it. I, however, have no access to that money. The only person that has access to that money is Larry. But by putting it in my name, he's making it seem as though this is money for everyone. And by putting all of the money in the students' names in the bank accounts, it was a very easy way to evade police because nothing was in Larry's name. Then Daniel scratched a frying pan. I don't know why these people keep scratching frying pans, but apparently it's quite alarming to Larry. He convinces Daniel that the reason Daniel scratched the frying pan was a manifestation of Daniel's doubts in himself. Because, yeah, that's logical. And it wasn't just emotional torture that these kids were going through. It was physical as well. So during this whole frying pan conversation, I don't know how many, I think this is the last conversation I'm going to discuss about frying pans in this case, but I don't know how many they discussed about it. But I guess while they're having this discussion of Daniel manifesting self-doubt by scratching a frying pan when he's doing the dishes, Larry also put his hand on Daniel's knee. And this is a quote from Daniel. Daniel said, "It was just a hand, just human grip, but it felt like I had gotten caught in some kind of industrial machinery. Like my leg was being chewed off at the thigh." And that's just one example of how something tiny was so blown out of proportion and given all this huge meaning behind and justified Larry torturing whichever student had done whatever tiny thing that they had done wrong in Larry's eyes. Larry made Claudia email her family, friends, and school officials to tell them that she had doubts about Larry. Now, it's Larry who's making her write this email, just so you know. I think I might have said letter, obviously. It's an email. She then continued, but it was all the manifestation of her own guilt for conspiring against Larry, being involved with Bernard and his ex-wife, and sabotaging his plan to help others. So that doesn't make any sense, obviously. And the reason I wanted to read that to you is to give you an idea of how these students' minds are just, I don't know how to, they're so brainwashed, confused. Nobody has any logic or common sense. It's just these like, cults are wild. They'll like, and then Claudia said that Larry had guided her on the path of acceptance, What she was accepting, I don't know. Probably that Larry was king of the world. Then Larry decided to take Claudia to visit her mother, and Larry was going to go with her. When Claudia got to her mother's house with Larry, she started talking about the extreme emotional abuse that she had received as a child. She also told her mother that she was never given priority or love. The mother was very, very confused. The mother did not know where this was coming from. She didn't know what situations happened that this was the result of your thinking. Because to the mother, what her daughter is saying sounds so foreign, and it really doesn't make sense in the family that she grew up in. When the mother is upset and trying to ask her daughter, who she loves very much, the mother's, she's very confused, but she definitely wants to make her daughter feel better, and she wants to fix whatever the problem is. And at that point, Larry just jumped into the conversation, completely took over it, and just bombarded her mother with question after question until her mother was just bawling her eyes out and could barely speak. And this was the effect that Larry had on people. During this time, Larry had convinced Isabella to make passes at Daniel. The benefits to Larry for this were twofold. First, he thought it would convince Daniel that Daniel wasn't gay, and Larry really, really wanted Daniel to not be gay. It also would open up Isabella to being more sexual. One day, Isabella and David were hanging out in the bedroom, and the two of them were almost like a couple now when Larry walked in his underwear. Larry began asking Daniel his sexual techniques that he used with Isabel, and then he started telling him things that he could do that would make it more pleasurable for Isabel. And of course, that led to him beginning to have sex with Isabel while he tells Isabel to start pleasing Daniel orally. So the three of them end up in a threesome. I'm going to quote Daniel exactly on this because he goes on to describe this threesome, and it's in a very peculiar way. He says his hands, speaking about Larry, looked funny. He was bent over her, and with the music, I couldn't help but see it like a religious sculpture, like she was sick or worse, and he, some kind of saint, might raise her with his touch. So that's what Daniel was thinking about during a threesome. Okay. Claudia had never been a real girly girl, but she was very much encouraged by Larry to use her girlish charm to seduce men and to have sex as often as possible. Even when she went to England to study, Larry would make her get on video calls with him and show him her naked body so that he could make sure she was following his guidelines. Because he had guidelines into how much they were allowed to eat. So I think in this situation, he just wanted to have the control to say to this girl, show me your naked body. But let's put it in a context that I'm concerned that you're not following the health guidelines I have set forth for you. Oh, great one. God, this guy makes me sick. Isabella was just told to have sex with whoever Larry told her to. Sometimes Larry would be involved in the sexual activity, sometimes not. But if Larry said to Isabel, go sleep with this man, Isabel, without question, would follow and do exactly as she was told. And I just want to point out, because I know a lot of times when it comes to cults, sometimes you can be hearing the story and you think, I would never fall for that shit. I would never, ever be convinced to do this or that or whatever. But cult leaders are very, very good. They're very good at selecting their victims, and they're very good of completely destroying any sense of self-esteem, anything. They basically beat the person down until the person is almost at the point where they can't make their own decisions. They have been brainwashed for so long that all they can do is follow what they're told to do. And he started living with these students in 2012. He doesn't go to jail for this until 2022. So this went on for 10 years. Santos is convinced that he is being helped a lot by Larry, and he has two sisters who he thinks need help. So he brings his sister to Larry. We'll get into the sisters a little bit more in a little while. Not only were these students being essayed, emotionally abused, but there was a lot of physical violence going on as well. Daniel at one point was beaten with a sledgehammer. Daniel at this point was sick of feeling horrible. He was sick of feeling like he was always doubting Larry, and he was sick of admitting to things that he knew that he had not done. Larry, again, who is obsessed with Daniel's sexuality, is having a conversation with Daniel one day, and Daniel admits that he is again doubting his sexuality because he's a gay man. I'm saying this, but Larry is very against him being gay. So when he admits that he is doubting his sexuality again and thinking that he may be gay, Larry decided to teach Daniel a lesson. He made Daniel strip naked in the living room in front of everyone and shove one of Isabella's vibrators up his butt. Everyone in the room was laughing, but Daniel wasn't laughing. Daniel was standing in the center of the room, completely humiliated, bawling his eyes out. So, you know how before I told you that Larry changed Daniel's name to Danny? Well, he decided he's going to change Daniel's name again. His name is still going to be Daniel, but we're going to remove the I. And symbolic, removing the I is removing I, as in Daniel, is completely removed from who I am. It was the last straw for Daniel when Larry blamed him for messing up Talia's law school applications. Daniel knew that he had not touched, seen, or done anything with anybody's law school applications. He knew this was not true. He had not done this. Daniel was starting to have his own thoughts, and he was starting to notice the pattern that Larry would go through to degrade and humiliate and torture these kids. So Larry decides he's got to punish Daniel again. He somehow concocts tinfoil balls that attach to Daniel's genitalia. I'm not exactly sure how the contraption works. All I know is that it's on Daniel and Larry is the one controlling it. And he just keeps twisting it over and over, making the pain worse and worse. until it becomes unbearable for Daniel. It was supposed to be a lesson and a hard one, so it was. Daniel had finally learned the lesson that he saw Larry for exactly who he was, and he could no longer be manipulated by Larry. At this time, Daniel hit the road and he was out of there, and good for him. But there were still a few students stuck there. Santo's sister, Felicia Rosario, was about to complete her medical degree, and she decided to drop out of college to get therapy from Larry. Now, if you have seen anything online of the Sarah Lawrence sex cult, the majority of the videos you see are the videos of Felicia being abused and tortured, and it's just horrific. I'm not going to include clips. I don't ever include clips or pictures of someone actually sustaining injuries. It's just not my vibe. I don't want to see it, and I don't want to share it. Felicity, I would say, had it the worst. Felicity definitely had some mental health issues. And then she was put in this environment where she was abused so badly, not only by Larry, but by everyone. It was nothing for Larry to throw her on the floor. It was nothing for any of them to starve her, hit her. Like, it's just unreal. And there's so many times, because Larry wanted everything of Felicia's filmed, so there's video of all of it, and she is literally just begging to just be left alone. At some point, it's almost like she's just begging to be left alone for a minute, just so she could try to think straight, because they are at her over and over, and they're holding her down, and they're forcing her to say and repeat certain things. And you can tell in the video, she's trying to do whatever it is will make this stop, but she doesn't know what to do to make this stop, because Larry's having the time of his life torturing this poor girl. He doesn't want this to stop. He is enjoying every single minute of this. All of these students were abused, but from the videos that I've seen, it seems as though Felicia was the person who got it the worst. Now, we don't necessarily know that that's true. I'm saying that because the videos that have been made public are the videos of Felicia. So I don't know if this was happening to every single other student, and maybe some of it wasn't taped, some of it wasn't released. The stuff that was done to Daniel was really, really horrible. Like, it's just so sad. There was this group of young students at college with their whole lives ahead of them. They were all extremely intelligent. They all had these like huge aspirations and dreams, and they were just amazing people. And Larry just came in and destroyed that. And for a long time, it seemed like Larry was getting away with this, and he was going to continue to get away with this, until an article came out in 2019 in New York Magazine that exposed everything. The police reached Larry's apartment and went in and arrested him, and when he was found, Isabel was in bed with him. They immediately arrested him, and he was charged on 15 counts, including racketeering, violent assault, trafficking, tax evasion, and money laundering. During the trial, the students testified to all of the horrors that they had lived through. They talked about how he would sleep deprive them and make them go for extremely days and days and sometimes into a week with no sleep, which is one of the worst things that you can do to someone if you're trying to drive them crazy. That's a really good way to do it. He would also limit what they could eat. There was a lock on the refrigerator and they were only allowed to eat what Larry told them and when Larry told them they could. Larry was found guilty on all charges and he was sentenced to 60 years in prison. Perfect. Bye, bitch. He'll be dead before he has a chance to get out. So that worked out well. Isabella, who was sometimes referred to as Larry's lieutenant, she still viewed him as a kind-hearted man. Isabella had also cut off contact with her mother since 2010 because Larry told her to. Of all the students, the only one that was ever considered to be part and helping Larry was Isabella, and she was charged with assisting him in money laundering and was sentenced to 5 years in prison. His daughter, she was never charged. Some people felt like she had brought people into him so that maybe she should have had some types of charges, but she didn't participate in crimes. And this was a girl who was brainwashed by this sick piece of shit since her birth. So the courts just felt like if she did do something wrong, we're going to let it slide. And that is the end of the Sarah Lawrence sex cult. Whoa. Thankfully, all of the students are now free from Larry. And I really, really hope that they are doing really well. And I hope that they've gotten the help that they need to deal with the amount of trauma that they went through. And I hope that they're leading really amazing, wonderful lives and really becoming the person that they were before this monster came in and tried to destroy who they were. So I just want to say a huge thank you to everyone who stuck around to watch the whole video, especially if you're a returning subscriber. I really, really appreciate you guys. I appreciate you supporting the channel and supporting me. And if you'd like to support the channel, stick around and watch another video. If you can like and leave me a comment, it really helps with the, as you know, algorithm of YouTube. So I would really appreciate that. I hope that you all have an amazing day and I will see you in the next one.